Hey, Buck Nation. Welcome aboard the Plunder Pre-Game show. This first inaugural show, it's going to be great. Today, we're going to briefly break down the Week 2 preseason matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's go.
All hands, hoist the colors high. Heave ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die.
Welcome aboard the Black Pearl.
Hey, everybody. Welcome in, and fucking glad to have you, baby. Look, we've got preseason Week 2 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. What we're going to do today is kind of preview everything. We're going to break it down a little bit, give you some over and unders for all those gamblers out there. But I'm so stoked. Listen, last week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the Cincinnati Bengals. The offense looked a little okay in the passing game. The rush game was really good, and we look to develop that even more coming this week. The defense played really well. Their rush defense was top-notch. We only gave up 2 big plays last week against the Cincinnati Bengals. This week, we go into Jacksonville. Duval! All right, let me tell you what. The Jacksonville Jaguars have a decent amount of talent. They've got Trevor Lawrence is quarterback. They've got backups with C.J. Beathard and Mac Jones. Yeah, Mac Jones has actually seemed to be revitalizing himself over there. He's actually having fun. There was reports earlier this week where he made a comment that he seems like he's having a lot more fun. But today we're going to focus on what we're going to bring to the table for the Buccaneers. As far as I'm concerned, after the 2-day joint practice where the Buccaneers were really physically pushed around in day one, we had a couple of decent highlight plays. Chris Godwin was Mr. Consistent, as he always is, coming through whenever we need somebody to come through. Sean Tucker actually had a nice screen pass rush down the right side of the field in practice. And Chris Braswell actually even got a sack, a presumed sack, of course, in the joint practice. The second day went a little bit better. There was a lot of physicality in the second day, and the defense actually stepped up and didn't get pushed around like they did in game one. To be honest with you, one of my first impressions coming into Week 2 is that rush game. Everybody saw it last week. We got to see Graham Barton in action. We got to see Elijah Klein in action. We got to see that center of the offensive line really move the defensive front seven. And that's something that we didn't get a hold of last year, was movement. When the offensive line got off the ball, we were just putting our hands on people and struggling. It's almost like our feet was standing still, but our hands were moving back and forth trying to do something, and it never happened. And in turn, we didn't create any holes. No created holes, no run game, which is why we struggled a great deal last year in the rush game. Now, for me, we had 4 running backs really step up last week. We had Bucky Irving get his first touchdown and taste of the end zone for the first time. We had Sean Tucker, a second-year running back who spent most of last season kind of, figuring out his way and getting healthy. And he really produced. I think he got 68 yards last week in the game. I want to say DJ Williams and Ramon Jefferson were the other 2 running backs. Ramon Jefferson actually got the touchdown that put us ahead with just under 2 minutes left, 17-14. The defense ended up coming in and holding off the Cincinnati Bengals. This week, I looked for Kyle Trask on offense to play a little bit better. He didn't play horrible last week. I mean, it was his first game of the preseason. And in the first few snaps, he ended up throwing a pick. And I think the second or third drive, I want to say it was the second drive, he ended up should have thrown a pick. Nonetheless, what I expect today with Kyle Trask, who went 12 for 20 last week with 144 yards, he had 1 interception that I spoke about, and his passer rating was 61.2. What I expect to see today is Kyle Trask, no interceptions. We cannot turn the ball over, whether it's preseason, regular season, or postseason. You turn the ball over, you give the other team points, and they're going to win the game. This is the NFL. This is not high school football. These guys really have to hold on to the ball. Excuse me. On the other side of that, I actually expect to see Trey Palmer get a little bit of action today and actually make some headway, because there's a tough battle for the number 3 wide receiver position on the Tampa Bay Bucs between Trey Palmer, and Jalen McMillan. Jalen McMillan is a rookie out of Washington who I've got high hopes for. I actually got him being the starter by the end of the season. Actually, I expect him to be the starter by about game 6. But a good problem to have, and prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong, Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer's biggest weakness last year was his hands. He had a hard time catching on the ball. We saw it in the last few weeks of the season in the playoff game. That cat can burn. He reminds me a lot like Deshaun Jackson, but he's got to be able to keep on to the ball. When we go out there and he caught, I want to say, 1 pass last week for 20 yards. Jalen McMillan actually caught 2. Raheem Jarrett caught a beautiful pass last week from Kyle Trask, so I like to see him a little bit more. But Trey Palmer's my offensive weapon focus, so to speak, this week. As opposed to the running game, I want to see Trey Palmer get a few catches, and I'd like to see Kyle Trask connect with Trey Palmer in the end zone. I expect to see the same thing out of the rush game this week as I did last week. I'd like to honestly see a little bit more of Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving. I don't know how they're going to split the reps up, but I'm really excited. On the offensive line, we talked about Graham Barton this past week and his effect on the offensive line in the run game. It's massive. Graham Barton was a first-round pick. Elijah Klein was a 6th-round pick, and I'm not doubting Elijah Klein's talent. He could be graded low, or he could have been drafted lower than what he should have based on his talent. But those 2 guys come in here. If you've got any questions, go to Brian Baldinger's Twitter. ex-NFL player. He broke down both of those guys last week. And look, those guys were not only getting off the snap, they were putting their hands on the defenders. Their feet were moving very rapidly, and they were pushing the defense to the left, to the right, back. And when they double teamed, and they did that effectively, the one that was designed to pop off of that initial block and move to the second level was able to do that. On the touchdown run from Bucky Irving, Graham Barton beat Bucky Irving, pushing a defender into the end zone by like a yard or 2. It was fantastic. That is the kind of power we need in the run game, because that's something we haven't gotten before. The athleticism from those interior offensive linemen is really going to be a help with the rush game for us. So I expect big things as far as the run game. There will be a minimal amount of starters, if any, in this week's game. And that's going to give us an opportunity to continue to see the development and the growth of the youth, the rookies, and the depth. That's one of the biggest weaknesses on this team. You can stay focused on the pass rush, and we don't have no pass rush. If you don't have any depth, you're not going to win, and you're not going to go far in the NFL. And to me, the roster's loaded with talent from top to bottom. We've got skill players from top to bottom. We've got great pieces. We've got a fantastic organization. We've got a tremendous culture in Tampa Bay. What we really don't have up to this point is depth. And having these young rookies and these depth players come in and actually put some reps in over these next 3 weeks is really going to solidify the depth. It's going to help organize the depth chart, because the depth chart is really wonky right now, because you've got a lot of indecisiveness past the first and second spot on that depth chart. I also would like to give a special shout out to Bucs Life. Thank you. We appreciate everything. Go Bucs. On the defensive side of the ball, last week we didn't get any pressure. That's my main focus. I don't care what player it's coming from. And honestly, we'll talk about what players we're wanting to look out for this week here in just a few minutes. But what I see is the rush game, or the rush defense, was phenomenal. They held the Cincinnati Bengals, which, granted, they don't have a big rush attack over there anymore. They lost Joe Mixon last year. In Jacksonville, we could see Travis Etienne played a little bit last week. I want to say, maybe looking at the stats, I didn't watch the game, but it looks like the starters played a drive, maybe 2. Trevor Lawrence even played. So what I expect to see is the defense come along, and even if it's first-team defense or offense on Jacksonville and the third-team defense on Tampa Bay, I expect to see continuous stoppage of the run. The pass defense wasn't that bad at all. Late in the game, they kind of had a few big plays. I want to say it was the second half, both of them, to their rookie wide receiver. One was like a 30 or 40-yard pass. The other one was like a 20-something yard pass. But those two big plays put them in a position to be able to score. One of those drives, they actually did score, which put them ahead. I want to say it was 13-10 at that point. And that's when, we went down and Wofford drove the ball, and Ramon Jefferson actually scored that touchdown. And look, thank God for the offensive line, because it seemed like they pushed that guy about 3 yards into the end zone. But the pass defense gave up those two big plays, and we really didn't see a ton of mistakes outside of that. So my focus is going to be putting pressure on the quarterback wherever it's coming from, and I'm hoping that it comes from the defensive line as opposed to your safeties, corners, and linebackers, because that's where we really need to see. We need to see edge rushers and defensive linemen really getting in the backfield and putting pressure on the quarterback to give our defense a chance to maintain and hold them down. Ben's got a comment. Gonna be vital for the Buccaneers to have a few good pass rushers this season if they want to go far. I agree, Ben. JTS, this is make or break time. I think it's past time. Hopefully Braswell comes along with his development. Look, as far as Braswell goes, BucDad's an Alabama fan, so I heard a lot about him when we drafted him. I knew a lot about him, and Alabama, you know a lot about their players. The guy took over for Will Anderson Jr. So he had a big set of shoes to fill. And last week, we didn't get any sacks. We had a few QB pressures. And Braswell actually led the Crimson Tide last year with 56 QB pressures. So what I expect to see, Logan Hall, Kalijah Cansey, Mike Green. I expect to see Chris Braswell. I don't know if JTS is playing. Again, I'm not sure exactly which starters are playing, which starters aren't playing. I'm assuming Logan Hall will come in and replace Yaya Diaby in the starting lineup for that particular spot. I think he's number 2 on the depth chart. So from that perspective, I want to see the front seven, actually the front 3 or 4, really get pressure on that quarterback. What that's going to do is give the ability to the cornerbacks to maintain their coverage, and that's going to prevent a lot of yards in the drives to shorten down from long drives to short drives, and they'll end up punting the ball instead of kicking field goals and scoring touchdowns. The production on the offense for the Jaguars need to be stopped, and we need to get the ball. That's another key point in this game, and that's going to be a key point moving through this season. We need to create turnovers. The Buccaneers are Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers are very adamant about blitzing a lot. I'm talking a lot. So that's going to put stress on the back end of your defense when you blitz a lot. I said rush, excuse me. When you blitz a lot, that puts pressure on the back end of your defense. So what we have to do is get pressure on the quarterback, put the quarterback on the ground. I mean, you really don't have to sack. Those are just glorified numbers. But at the same time, if you can get in that quarterback's face, if you can de-stress him, if you can get him out of his comfort zone, move him out of the pocket, and get him in an unstable situation, he's going to turn the ball over eventually. And that's what we got to focus on. So my key focus is, Misador, how you doing today? Thanks for coming in. Keep an eye out on Gnu. I think that's the way you pronounce that, Gnu. Not that I think he will make the team, but if he puts in another game together. Yeah, look, he had a decent game last week. He actually did for a guy that I didn't even know. I really didn't. So I actually went up and looked about him. But again, I'm like you. I don't necessarily expect him to make the team unless he hits it with the special teams. But we've got to create pressure. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. And I promise you, if we start creating pressure with our secondary players, those starters are going to have pressure to continue to create that pressure once they come in the game at the beginning of the season. So all of that being said, we've got to see efficient football. We can't turn the ball over whatsoever. That's going to be a killer for us. If we turn the ball over, we're going to have big problems. We're going to have to create turnovers. We're going to have to put pressure on the quarterback, and we're going to have to run the ball. Those things right there are, in my opinion, as a football fan, I'm 44 and I've been a football fan literally my whole life. I grew up in South Georgia, so it's a life thing. It's not just something we enjoy. It's part of who we are. And that being said, I know those few key components are critical to success in the NFL. Something else I want to keep an eye on, the play calling. I want to continue to see how Liam Cohen actually develops his play calling from day one through the end of the season. Tyke Smith will be a huge difference maker this season. Look, if you paid attention to Jason Light's draft this year, and it was very different, go back and look, very different, and there was something that really stood out to me this year compared to the previous years. Almost every single draft pick in this draft was drafted by a high caliber, very competitive, championship pedigree type football teams in college football. Washington, Alabama, these cats, Georgia, these cats are used to high pressure situations. They're used to being on TV with millions and millions and millions of people watching them when they're the only game on TV. So you got the whole nation or the whole world watching you when there's no other football on. So teams like this, you got Washington was in a national championship. Alabama, need not say more. Georgia, need not say more. Those guys have a pedigree of winning football. They have a pedigree of winning cultures. And I agree with you, Tyke Smith is going to be a huge impact. Personally, I think that's who replaces Jordan Whitehead. I think we move him back to safety and get him back there at strong safety, and I think he's a great replacement for Jordan Whitehead. But look, I'm not trying to get rid of Whitehead. I'm super stoked the guy's back. I can't wait to see the dude on the field. We've had a few injuries this past week. Really nothing major. Todd Bowles actually was questioned about the injuries earlier this week. Payne Durham had a minor knee injury. I think Merriweather had a shoulder or an arm injury or something like that. But I wouldn't worry too much about those. They weren't made a fuss about them, and nothing else came from that since then. So all in all, what you're looking at is banged up players being physical for the first time in a couple of months, and their body's got to get used to, being in that game day shape. That being said, Yaya is coming. Okay. So what we're going to do now is give you a little bit of over-under information. The Jacksonville Jaguars, we're actually playing in Duval. So typically from the betting standpoint, that gives the home team a slight advantage. Typically it's like 3 points the home team will get naturally from having home field advantage. The over-under for this game is 37.5 points. I'm going to pick the under on that one. Jacksonville is also favored by 3.5. I'm taking the Bucs with the points. The Bucs are probably going to win head up. I actually was doing some research over the last day or two on the Jaguars because I don't know much about them. And a lot of their players aren't. I mean, if you compare the Buccaneers and they're all NFL players. Let's stop right there. They're all NFL players and they all made it to the league. So that's something. But what I'm saying is the level of talent over here in Tampa and the level of talent in Jacksonville aren't the same. Their defense is not the same. Now, granted, this is also second, third, fourth stringers and guys who've never played it down in the NFL who are playing tonight and mostly tonight. But, again, there's standards and there's cultures that have to be derived from the starting position all the way to the last position in the depth chart. So, what that means is just because you're the starter and you're out, second string guy is not going to necessarily perform and the third string like the starter will, but you need to see that same efficiency going on. Yeah, actually, please comment down below what you think the scoring predictions are going to be for tonight. Actually, if you'd like, you can tell me your over-under pick. You can tell me if you think the Bucs are going to win, the Bucs are going to lose, or the Bucs are going to cover the spread. Comment down below. I will react to everybody's comment that comes in the show and comments. I really appreciate you for taking the time out. First off, let me give a plug to my fans. Thank you guys for the support. I really appreciate all the support. Me and BucDad do. We've worked really hard to bring this to you guys every week, week in and week out. We're adding this new pregame and postgame show. So I really want to say thank you. But other than that, smash the heart button. Share this. Comment below. Share the profile. That's the way I want you to show me love. Other than that, I don't need nothing from you but your attention because what I'm trying to do is bring something for you. I could sit here and talk with my buddy sitting beside me, watch the game, and it'd be no, never mind. I enjoy doing this. I have a passion for it, and I really want to bring good information to you. And you know what? Like some other people, I'm going to bring you the right fucking information. I'm not sure who the starter is for Jacksonville, whether it's going to be C.J. Beathard or Mac Jones, but I actually don't expect a lot from Mac Jones. Mac Jones is going to take a long time. I don't even expect him to honestly make the team in Jacksonville. I would be surprised. I actually like C.J. Beathard a little bit more. He's come in and been a diligent backup in the past, and he's actually started quite a few games in the NFL. So that's something to lean on. Something else I want to talk about is the players that we expect to have big games. On the offense, I mentioned it earlier, Kyle Trask. I expect a big game from Kyle Trask. He's pretty much solidified his spot as the number 2 quarterback on the Bucs roster behind Baker Mayfield, which is clear above beyond the starter. But John Wofford, come from actually L.A., where he played under Cohen's tutelage last year. He actually come in and played rather well. I think he was 12 of 18, and Kyle Trask was 12 of 20. Neither one of them had a touchdown, though. And Wofford didn't have an interception. So semantically, he played a tad bit better. He also led that gorgeous drive down the field that put us ahead late in the game under 2 minutes. Another player I expect big things from again this week is Elijah Klein. I want to see the same effort from Elijah Klein, who was a 6th-round draft pick by the Buccaneers. He is a very athletic guard, but he was getting the same movement and dominating that defensive line in Cincinnati last week the same way that Graham Barton. I expect Graham Barton to be the starter by the beginning of the season. Look out for Elijah Klein to be the starter by the end of the season as well. Bredesen is a vet, but he's the prototype of what we're looking for to improve our run game is an Elijah Klein, is a Cody Mock, is a Graham Barton. More athletic interior offensive linemen. That's what's going to get that quick movement with that power. Because as you know, if you've watched the show, if you read my reports in the past, or if you've heard anything else on social media about Graham Barton, his transition from speed to power is ridiculous. It's simply ridiculous. The guy is uber powerful. I mean, he's an offensive lineman, so you got to assume that. But he's ultra quick to be a huge guy like he is. And so are the guards. And I believe this year is going to be a big step up for Cody Mock, who was struggling last year. And I believe it's the same thing as a player like Yaya Diaby, when earlier in the preseason, he was talking about how so far in camp, the mindset of where he needed to be, what he needed to do, what he needed to expect versus what he was seeing. And now it's almost coming naturally, he was saying. And I feel that's going to be the same way with Cody Mock. He's going to feel more comfortable in his position. He's going to be a lot more skilled and a lot more educated on his craft. So I expect big things from him. But tonight, I want to see Elijah Klein open some holes. I believe between Klein and that offensive interior line continuing to open the holes, and Kyle Trask have a big game, we're going to blow that over-under out of the water. There's no doubt about that. What I don't see is a lot of points coming from Jacksonville. They got a lot of prove-it people, and they're not going to start a ton of starters. They've actually got I want to say they just signed Tayshaun Gibson, who is a crafty vet as a safety. So he's going to be a good addition to that team to help the young guys come along. But I don't see any way whatsoever that there could be a challenge to the Buccaneers winning the game tonight. Now, win aside, I don't give a damn. What I want to see is efficiency. I want to see blocks. I want to see movement on the offensive line. I want to see pressure on the quarterback. I don't want to see many drop passes. I want to see touchdown catches. I want to see separation from these receivers. So Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, Raheem Jarrett, all speedy receivers. I believe all of those can get separation against this Jacksonville defense. And I really believe we can definitely put some points on the board this week. I believe we have that potential tonight against the Jacksonville Jaguars to really open up the offense a little bit. So that's what I expect on offense. On defense, I expect sacks. Got to have sacks. My players to watch out for on defense, Chris Braswell and Josh Hayes. Josh Hayes was actually the cornerback that gave up those two big pass plays. They were both on a double move. I promise you, that cat in the secondary coaches worked on him with double moves this past week because he got burnt on both of those double moves by that rookie. I expect Josh Hayes and Chris Braswell to show up tonight. I expect him to have a better night, so I'm going to be watching out here for him. And Chris Braswell, I really want to see him get pressure on that quarterback. I'm not caring about sacks right now. I want to see him get off the block. I want to see his feet move. I want to see his hands moving. I want to see him using his skills and his athletic ability. His reach is ridiculous. The other day in practice, in the first day of the dual practice, the sack that was credited to Chris Braswell physically pushed the defense or the offensive tackle back into Trevor Lawrence, and he pushed Trevor Lawrence. And that's when they actually blew the whistle. And in those kind of practices, that was known as a sack and the end of the play. So what we're going to do is I want you to comment below your scoring predictions. I want you to comment who you're expecting big things out of and who you're keeping your eye on. Make sure to tune in immediately following the game. Within 10 or 15 minutes of the game ending, we'll have post-game. Until then, thank you for joining me on the Buccaneers pre-show. Look forward to seeing you after the game. Go Bucs.